Today, we're talking about information law, but I want you to forget about dusty old law books for a minute. Instead, think of it like this. It's the architectural blueprint for our entire digital society. It's the grand design that dictates how we build, interact, and basically live in this virtual world of ours.
And that brings us to the big question, right? How do you actually build a legal system for a world that's constantly in flux, a world made of code and data? What does that kind of architecture even look like? So, here's the blueprint for our tour today. We're going to start with the foundation, looking at how it connects to legal science. Then, we'll check out the building materials, the sources of this law. After that, we'll see it all in action with a look at Bulgaria. And finally, we'll wrap it all up.
Okay, first things first. Every great structure needs a rock-solid foundation. Before we can really get our heads around the building itself, we have to understand the core principles it's built on. So, let's start right there.
The very bedrock of all this is what's called the general theory of law. You can think of it as the basic physics of the legal world. It gives us these essential concepts like legal norms, the rules, legal facts, which are the events that trigger those rules, and legal relationships, the rights and duties that connect us all. What information law does is take these classic, time-tested principles and figure out how to make them work in the digital age.
Then you've got legal informatics. Now, if the general theory provides the laws of physics, legal informatics provides the specialized engineering toolkit and the methodology. It's the science of how you actually organize and process all that legal info to systematically build laws that are going to work in a digital world without falling apart.
And just look at this. This really shows how interconnected information law is. You don't have to read all the little details to get the main point. It's not some isolated tower off on its own. Nope, it's the central hub that connects to pretty much every other branch of law you can think of, from criminal and commercial all the way to constitutional law. It is fundamentally changing how all of them have to operate online. And how does it do that? Well, it influences them by introducing entirely new building blocks, brand new concepts that just didn't exist before. We're talking about things like electronic statements, or get this, automatic declarations of will made by a machine. These aren't just little tweaks. They force all other areas of law to completely rethink how they function.
All right, so we've poured the foundation. Now, let's look at the actual building materials. Where does the substance of information law really come from?
It's all organized in this really clear, three-tiered structure. We're going to start at the very broad international level, then zoom in to the powerful regional level of the European Union, and finally, bring it all home to the specific national sources. Down at the base, you have international acts. These are huge conventions and agreements between tons of different countries, and they set the global standards on really critical stuff like data protection and cybercrime. They basically provide the plot of land and the basic zoning rules for everybody to follow.
Now, this second tier is a really big deal, especially in Europe. We're talking about EU regulations. I want you to think of these as powerful, high-grade, prefabricated parts of the building. When the EU passes a regulation like the GDPR or the new AI Act, it is directly applicable in all member states. It doesn't need to be translated into national law, it just is the law, period.
But it's not just about regulations. The EU also uses other tools. You have directives, which set goals that member states have to achieve, but they get a little flexibility on how they do it. And then the decisions from the Court of Justice are absolutely crucial. They act like the detailed finishings that clarify exactly how all the pieces are supposed to fit together.
And that brings us to the third and final tier, national sources. This is where a country uses its own specific materials, its constitution, its own laws, and its own court decisions, to finish the structure. It's how the building gets tailored to unique legal traditions, all while still respecting those higher-level blueprints from the EU and international agreements.
So, we have the theory, we have the materials. Let's see what this looks like when the rubber hits the road. We're going to zoom in on a real-world case study. What's happening right now with legislative development in Bulgaria?
This slide captures the central tension perfectly. On the left, you've got the internal needs of the country, the demand for a modern legal framework, for things like e-government and e-justice. But on the right, you see this incredibly powerful external force, that growing trend of the EU regulating directly through those top-down regulations we just talked about.
And the result of that tension is pretty profound. This isn't just a minor update.
That external EU influence is so strong that it's actively redrawing the country's own legal blueprints. We're seeing essential parts of existing Bulgarian laws literally being repealed and replaced by the EU's prefabricated components. It really highlights one of the core challenges of our digital age. How do you balance national sovereignty with the need for these big, unified, supranational rules?
Okay, let's step back and take one last look at the entire structure we've just walked through. What can we say about this incredibly dynamic blueprint for our digital world?
Well, first, information law isn't about inventing a whole new rulebook from scratch. It's about skillfully adapting timeless legal principles for this new virtual world. Second, its sources are multi-layered and hierarchical, flowing from the global all the way down to the local. And third, and this is so important, this is not a static field. It is a living, breathing architecture, constantly being reshaped by new tech and powerful forces like the EU.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. The digital world we're all building together is only getting more complex. So, as we look to the future, what kind of legal blueprint are we going to need next to make sure this world is fair, functional, and just for everyone?